Hello, everyone. We're really excited for you guys to join us today. My name is Reuben. I'm a Terry Ambassador, third year MIS in Finance double major here from Johns Creek, Georgia. And we're really excited to have you guys join our panel today. We have three very established Terry alums joining us today. And today's topic will be leading through challenging times. And I will kick it off to Sarah as well.
Hi, everyone. So excited that you all are here. My name is Sarah Houghton, and I am a senior ambassador majoring in management information systems, and I do have the co-major in international business. I do want to go over just a few things. We do ask that you guys keep your videos on, but you do stay muted while the panelists are speaking. We will have a Q&A at the end of the session for about 20 minutes. You guys are welcome to then unmute yourselves and speak to any of the panelists, or you can raise your hand, throw the question in the chat, whatever you would prefer. We also do recommend that you guys use the speaker view option on Zoom just to make it easier to see and stay focused on the person who is speaking. So with that, I do want to pass it over to our moderator for today, David Wilds, who is the program coordinator for international business.
Thanks, Sarah and Reuben. Welcome, folks, to the IB Alumni Panel as part of the International Business Week event. We are joined by three illustrious alumni from Terry College and with a relationship to international business, and we are very happy that they're here and that they're going to be able to share their experiences and advice with you all. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, so we'll start off at the top here with Miss Elisabeth Duffy.
Hey, everybody. So I graduated with an international business and marketing double major in 2010, so it's been a little bit of time for me. Since that time, I went directly into the consulting realm with Capgemini. So I was with them for about 5 years. I spearheaded their first advanced analytics incubator. So I ran that as a manager for them before going to Kellogg, Northwestern's business school for 2 years. And then after that time, or since that time, I've been with Bain and Company. So I'm a manager with Bain. I focus on tech strategies. So think the Google, Facebooks, Microsofts of the world. And I also specialize in venture capital investment. So helping to figure out where our clients should be placing their bets in terms of startups.
Thanks, Elisabeth. We'll move on to our second panelist here, Mr. Benjamin Kepner.
Hey, everyone. My name is Benjamin Kepner. I am a IB co-major that graduated in 2011 with an international business and marketing degree. I spent some time in social media right out of college. So if you can believe 2010 was really the creation of a social media job, I was kind of that first guy. Lots happened in the social media industry over a decade, and today I have my own company. We're a social media marketing company called Global Social Media Marketing. We're headquartered in Denver, Colorado, and we provide a variety of social media marketing service solutions to a number of different industries. Primarily, we'll focus on YouTube, Facebook, and Google because those are the three most visited websites in the world. And I have done some international business throughout my career. I've spent some time living in Spain. I was a Spanish and Chinese minor at the University of Georgia as well, and really excited to connect with the UGA IB program for this event, and thanks for having me.
Thanks, Benjamin. And for our third panelist, Mr. Nicholas Friedman.
Hey guys, I'm Nick Friedman. I graduated, all the way back in 2006. And I graduated in 2006, and my actual major was international business, and my emphasis was marketing in Spanish. I think that's how it was back then. And my father taught at Terry for 27 years up until 2011, and he did a lot of international business consulting, and so I, followed my dad's footsteps, majored in international business, and I functionally lived his American dream. He moved here from South America to work at a multinational, but couldn't get a visa. So he just kept getting educated. And by the time he had a PhD, he ended up in academia. And so I got an internship at Citibank while as an undergrad at Terry and turned that into a job at Citibank in New York upon graduation. And currently my role at Citi is I'm an ultra high net worth private banker for the Citi Private Bank. So we help clients and family offices with at least $25 million with us as a relationship. So, and of course, we're a global bank with global clients.
Thanks, Nick. So we're going to start this off with a few questions that we've pre-made for the panelists before we open it up to Q&A. But at any time, folks, if you do have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we will get to them in due time. Let's start this off. This is one for all three of our panelists. So the title of this panel is leading in difficult and challenging times. So I really sort of want to start with, what does leadership in business look like to each of you? And we'll kick it off in the order that we started in. Elisabeth.
Tough question. What does leadership in business mean to me? I think it's looking very different right now than it once was pre-COVID-19. But in general, I think leadership in my mind means, one, knowing how to tap into the resources and the talents of everyone on your team. And I think for the three of us, it is on a global scale. So really recognizing the diversity of experiences and knowledge as a result of that, and really being able to tap into it. And two, it's empowering those that you're working with to really reach for whatever their goals are from a business perspective, as opposed to just looking at what we need from our team members that's right in front of us. So it's really figuring out on a global scale, what are those professional development opportunities and what can they really bring to the team?
And we'll pass that along to Benjamin if you have any another thought or anything to add.
Yeah, definitely. So I would say leadership for me means doing the right thing and helping people grow to their greatest potential. I think leadership gets confused a lot with management, and those are two completely different things. And I would say that good leaders are doing more than just managing people. And the great leaders are going to create a team environment that's going to help their team get to an overarching vision or mission that the company can connect to.
Yeah, I totally agree with what's been said, but specifically what Benjamin said about management and leadership are two separate things. I'll make my answer narrow to COVID. The Zoom environment, and I would say leadership now is walking the walk. And so you either lead from the front if you manage people, or it's being efficient and really self-motivated. I have not been to my office since March 12th of last year, and I'm a banker. So the benefit of COVID for me has been my clients are grounded. So I've had a lot of interaction via Zoom, and the very atypical thing is my business is typically very in-person driven, and so that's been missing. And so for leadership, I would just define it as rising to the occasion. Very early in your career, or hopefully already in college, you should know that you really can't worry about things you cannot control. And so you really just have to worry about yourself. And I don't mean to sound preachy. That's kind of exactly what I tell my 7-year-old, but just worry about yourself and help your team. And I would say, David, specifically, that you have to be very intentional about mentoring. So I have some new folks on my team, and I worked with them in the office for weeks and then haven't seen them in over a year. So being very intentional about check-ins and one-on-ones is leadership in this COVID world.
Let's actually stick on that for just a tad bit more. Elisabeth and Benjamin, how has leading on your teams in your particular industries changed during COVID?
So I will say from a consulting perspective, it's changed pretty drastically. So before, this time, just a little before this time last year, Bain has a home office model, which means the projects that we work on, you're working it essentially out of your region or out of your home office. So for me, originally it was based out of Chicago and now Atlanta. And so we were somewhat limited in the interactions we had outside of that office. And since that time, what COVID-19's enabled us to do is, as opposed to getting on 2 to 3 different flights per week to be with clients. It's enabled us to have a more global lens in terms of the teams that we're working with. So from a leadership perspective, that means, no longer are we able to interact in person, but it does mean that we're able to have a much more diverse team within Bain and a much more diverse client base. So it's working. So as of today, for example, met with those out of New Delhi, met with those out of Scandinavia, and then touched base with the SF team to pull together a much more comprehensive answer. And so leadership has become more about figuring out how to get to know people on a personal level without being in person, while also tapping into a broad range of experiences and knowledge.
I just want to press on that one just a little. How does one, do that now? Get to know these diverse individuals, across borders and across the country, through Zoom. How does that work for you?
Honestly, it has to be a lot more intentional. I feel like when your calendar is filled with Zoom meetings, it's easy to just get on a meeting and dive into whatever's on the agenda. But what I'm finding is it's just really important to start everything off with just figuring out how those people are doing. I mean, all of us have been really personally impacted by COVID-19. So a lot of it's figuring out, how they're doing. If they're really focused on work, what's going on in their personal lives. Another really fun thing about Zoom is you actually can meet their significant others or their pets or other things you're not able to see when people are in business casual attire traveling to a client site. So it's really making the time to get them to know them on a more personal level first.
That's a big point. Whether it's clients or ultra senior executives, things that in the past were faux pas, like bringing home to work, well, you're working at home. And so whether it's clients or other junior or very senior coworkers, pets and children and spouses walking through the background, and it's like an enhancer. Frankly, it makes interaction with clients more personable, more human, and it's very corny, but Zoom happy hours and things like that are played out. But a lot of it is being intentional about having a Zoom or even an old-fashioned phone call, not about an acute work issue, just checking in. What's up? How's your family? Do you have vacation? It's very basic, but in an always working environment. So I work for Citi, and recently our CEO came out and said Zoom free Fridays and no more Zooms outside of standard work hours. And you'd be surprised how highly effective one calendar day a week with no internal Zooms, what an impact it's had for morale and just, don't straighten your hair Fridays or whatever,
Hope Terry's taking note.
Yeah.
Benjamin, real quick, I wanted to pass the same question to you, but I want to add a little twist to it because I know that you work pretty close with the marketing department and you take on a lot of interns. How do you do leadership specifically for folks who have not in a semi-professional fashion, but aren't quite into the workforce just yet? How do you deal, especially now, doing that kind of Zoom leadership with the younger folks?
Yeah, so the interesting thing for me is I'm in the social media industry. So, we were doing in-person stuff, sure, at events, but I was already managing a remote team before everything happened last year. And I was already doing Zooms or Google Meets. We use the Google Suite because it's free. And so my students or my interns were very well prepared, actually. I even had feedback from some of them saying, hey, Benjamin, your internship has already prepared me for the new UGA experience, which everyone's taking Zoom calls now and everything like that. I think the challenging thing has been more of the teamwork aspect of our company, right? There is something that, seeing my dog in the background or seeing a family member is personalized, that it's great, that you just can't get that really getting to know someone from my perspective, especially something that I left with Terry personally as in-person connections, that in-person meeting is almost untangible, right? It's that powerful. And so I think what's happened for our interns at UGA is, it's been, as a company, as many companies have, we're not kind of suggesting that people meet in person for obvious reasons. So it's been challenging to kind of encourage the team to say, hey, can we do something socially distanced? Can you get the cell phone number of your colleague now and create more of a text call type of relationship, do a Google Meet call? It's finding different ways for the team to become closer, with us really kind of missing that in person, right? I can't just, in the past, our interns would go to Grady, or they would go to Terry, or they would go to the Student Learning Center. They would get a study room. We all know that life. You'd be in the study room for hours studying, doing your work together, take breaks, get to walk around campus, get a cup of coffee. So that's been tough. And I think our solution for leadership has just been more focused on creating one-to-one relationships with people, and not feeling like, we're just working at a company, because it definitely does feel like personal and business are being mixed a lot now.
Interesting point there. And I want to shift this a little bit towards like the IB specific aspect of it. So we talked a little bit about developing these one-on-one relationships, a little bit of the blending of like the personal and work. How is that reflected in sort of like dealing with folks outside of the United States, dealing with like clients from other countries? Like Elisabeth, you mentioned like the UGA office. Benjamin, I know you've been talking to me about you're expanding a little bit into Latin America. Nicholas, if you deal with international clients as well. So if you could share just a little bit about how this particular style of making these connections has changed dealing with international individuals. And whoever wants to take this one first is welcome to jump on in.
Yeah, I'll take this one. So we actually were focused in the first quarter of 2021 on 3 international countries specifically, because we do social media in English primarily, right? We do social media in other languages, but we were kind of expanding in the last 3 months in the UK, Ireland, and New Zealand / Australia. And a lot of those countries are all in different environments, and where their governments are allowing business to operate in different ways. I would say most of the people that I talked from Australia and New Zealand, for the most part, felt pretty confident during all of this. Wasn't a lot of stress going on there. Things have been pretty open. You talk to people in the United Kingdom right now, it's a whole nother experience. Very similar, I would say, to the United States. Things have just recently opened back up there, and we also know as Americans, we have not been able to travel to many of these places. So that's been an issue for international travel opportunities. In Latin America, I would say that's kind of where we're going to expand to. They've also kind of had some state of emergencies that they've announced in specific countries. Other countries, you can regularly travel in there, no problem. What I would say overall is, I think the whole Zoom burnout is real, but it's also what we have. So I think people internationally realize at this stage that if there is no international business travel happening, that Zoom is that new way that we're going to conduct business internationally. Most people are familiar with that now. And it actually kind of works out well to a certain extent. Instead of me giving my US phone number for somebody to try to get in contact, or getting a WhatsApp download or something like that, it's like, hey, here's my calendar, here's a Zoom call. It's almost kind of normal now. I've even seen a lot of people internationally where they lead into the email saying, here's my calendar, book it on my calendar. It's not even a, when are you available, what's your number anymore. It's like, here's my calendar, book a Zoom. So I think it's been interesting from that perspective to say, I think internationally even has a bigger opportunity now, because people have adopted the idea of these virtual meetings more.
Can I jump in, Elisabeth?
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, the for international business, for anything investment or banking or anything highly regulated, it's actually been an enhancer. A lot of our regulations predate the internet and the modern era, and so I'm able to do business with a Kuwaiti client whose banker that covers them is in our Switzerland office, but he's Italian. So if you're tracking, I have a Qatari client who lives in Oman who has a banker who covers their Far East relationship out of Switzerland, but he's Italian. And so those are things that are not possible with a lot of expense and logistics and time, whereas now we just jump on a Zoom. Switzerland's only 5-6 hours ahead, depending on our time zone. And doing business in Singapore, and which is a major hub for us financially for the East, has been easy because we'll catch an 8 a.m., which for them is an 8 p.m. meeting, And in the past, my boss once flew to Morocco to take a client to lunch, which if you think about the insanity of that now, this is a lot more efficient. So it's been an enhancer, and the regulators have followed suit. So now, you have to meet clients in person to do heavy banking. Well, now you can have a Zoom and they can hold their ID, and it's just a lot more efficient.
Has that efficiency sort of like taken away from like that personal relationship with the client, or?
So yes, the CEO of the private bank or the institutional side of where I work at Citi is a lot of our Zoom success is built on equity from in person. And that's totally accurate. And that's true in a work environment, and it's true with a client environment. It's very difficult to organically get to know somebody you never knew before COVID, only in a Zoom setting. It's possible, especially with a warm referral, but essentially Zoom's been great for closing deals, and it's been tricky for creating brand new interactions because of you're missing the let's grab a coffee situation.
I'll toss this potato over to Elisabeth as well.
Oh, sure. So from an international perspective, I think certainly, again, going back to really being able to get to know your clients on a personal level, it's certainly different now that you're not just taking them out to lunch and really getting to know them one-on-one. So going back to, again, what Nick was highlighting and really setting aside that additional time, outside of those meetings, having those happy hours, as I'm sure you are all so sick of those, being a Georgia and having way too many of them, but it's still just so important to get to know them on a personal level, and even more so now that, at least within consulting, we're definitely seeing the world is even flatter with COVID-19. So before, clients really appreciated that FaceTime culture. So even for them, they really expected consultants to fly to them, which limited where all we could actually send people from. So for example, we worked on the UK space strategy last month. And before that time, we would have focused on our teams within the UK, within EMEA. But because of Zoom, we were able to tap into the best of our knowledge base globally, right? Pulling in people who had worked on SpaceX and in different areas outside of just that region. And so I think what's wonderful is they don't expect us to be there in person any longer, and we're able to bring in even more people into the picture with more diverse backgrounds, with an even stronger skill set. And so from a personal perspective, it's again, being strategic and how we get to know them on a personal level. But overall, I think it's been a really positive change for the consulting industry.
Well, talking about change here and pulling back to something that Nicholas said earlier about rising to the occasion and generally about this whole situation with COVID, what do you think, let me rephrase that real quick. When vaccines become a little bit more widespread, perhaps travel becomes a little bit more easier, and some of these, barriers are lowered. One, what kind of aspects of these COVID changes do you think will stay? And two, which of those do you think will actually be good changes? And I'm going to pass that one around to all three of y'all again, if that's all right, just because the various industries.
I'll just go really brief to have more Q&A time. Everything I think going forward will be a hybrid. If even the regulators can become a bit more flexible or have a bit more common sense about a meeting is a meeting if we're at the same table or if we're live on a Zoom video chat. And so I would just say that when it matters, FaceTime will be there. And I think the companies will be excited to spend money on travel again to hopefully help their bottom line. But there won't be that pressure or necessity, and in my industry, that regulatory requirement to force monthly, quarterly, or biannual interaction, depending on what the underlying client is.
And so from a consulting perspective, I'd say one of the biggest issues when it comes to turnover is sustainability. And one of the primary drivers of that is travel. So as we see our clients start to adopt more hybrid models, allowing their own employees to stay at home, we're already seeing, we're not planning on getting back to the road for 4 or 5 days a week. It's more, our clients have seen that they're able to be just as productive with consulting services remotely as they are in person. And so I think it's going to lead to a much greater level of sustainability within consulting and hopefully less turnover as a result.
I would agree with both of the other panelists. I mean, hybrid, I think, is what I would expect to happen, but I can't be for certain. And I would just say, I think companies overall are just going to be more flexible. I think that's really more of the word is, do you want to work from home? Do you want to come in office? Do you want to work at a co-working space? Do you want to have a Zoom happy hour? It's, it's almost like a better environment from that perspective for business going forward, because we're giving employees maybe a better quality of life by not being so rigid in this structure of 9 to 5 in person. You have to be at a cubicle. I think flexibility would be the big point that I would make, is more companies will adapt hybrid approaches with flexible options.
Speaking about being flexible, doing these changes and adapting, then how do you lead a team through that kind of flexible change, through this kind of, quasi return to normal?
Yeah, it's tough. I don't think there's a golden answer. I feel like leaders are all going in their outspoken or unspoken ways. And I think the biggest thing, at least for me as a leader, that I've realized is mental health is super important right now. There are a lot of people that have been struggling, and some people are not meant to be on Zoom all day. That's just not their personality. So you need to be able to understand in business that some people are okay being on Zoom and others, frankly, would prefer not to be. So I think just being aware of that and being aware of, it's a strange place for everyone. This is, how many times have we seen the word unprecedented in an email? But at the same stage, we have to adapt and we have to stay positive. And I think just being in an environment that encourages good mental health as a leader or as an employee is something that is positive right now that we can try to do in the short term.
Yeah, I love that answer. Mental health and essentially catering to your employees, or at least hearing them. I do a lot of work, and so some of the people on this call are aware, with diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's for a whole nother thing on why on earth I'm involved with that as an outwardly appearing white guy. But being Zoom compliant is at the forefront of the Black Heritage Network at Citibank, because it's all relative. So being on a Zoom every single day for me is like a 10-minute situation. I take a shower and comb my hair and I'm good, but there's no makeup, there's no braiding of my hair, there's no styling, there's no dyeing of my hair yet. So that's one of those things, you never have thought about that before this Zoom world, but being on a Zoom means different thing to different peoples, and the implications are different to people based on their culture, their appearance, or their home situation. I have raised my hand and been very vocal that 8:15 Zooms to replace our commute is total BS for anyone that has children of any age. That's prime time school drop off or school logging on. I've been very outspoken about that because the people setting that rule haven't had a small child in 30 years. And it's, so I just have to point it out. So as my dad would say, it's your duty to give the feedback as a customer. So go, Elisabeth.
Yeah, I think we've touched on the listening part of this enough, so I won't harp on that. But I think another core part of not only leadership, but just creating a unified team is finding ways to have team fun. It's something that my company really focuses on when we're traveling together and we have case team budget. But now finding new and innovative ways outside of just Zoom conversations to bond as a team. So for example, we do water cooler trivia every week, where we'll challenge a different part of the company for a quarter at a time and be able to take them on in trivia episodes or whatever every Mondays. We have karaoke, which is kind of embarrassing. And every week we use GIFs to actually describe how we're feeling in that week. And we have to guess which one belongs to each person. And so you kind of figure out, you're going to have people who are really extroverted and are willing to share how they're feeling during this kind of chaotic time. And you're going to have those who aren't quite as comfortable as sharing that. So finding different ways and platforms for people to really get to know each other on a more personal basis outside of just asking how they're doing has been really important.
Yeah. We had a mandatory national Zoom, and Matthew McConaughey sat there drinking something alcoholic, talking to us about debiting our life balance versus debiting our bank balance. It was bananas, but it was really interesting. It was just a refresher that our CEO pulled together. And that's a good example of what Elisabeth is saying. It's like mandatory fun. You used to poke fun of it, like going to Top Golf with your team. It's like forced fun. Zoom fatigue is real, but you know what? It's better than, traveling across 7 time zones. I say Zoom fatigue is better than for real jet lag. So
for sure.
Well, we're coming up here on about time for us to open up to general Q&A, but I have one last series of questions for each of y'all about leadership in business, and specifically about giving back and leading for undergraduates and graduate students here at Terry. And each of you guys are involved in a form of giving back and in general involvement on campus. So I want you guys to talk a little bit about it. We'll start with Elisabeth. Can you talk to us a little bit about your work with the Young Alumni Board and about the importance of maintaining connections with fellow graduates from Terry and that value of networking?
For sure. So there's a lot of benefits of staying involved with Terry. And so I just became part of the Terry Young Alumni Board a little under a year ago. And so, one of the benefits, honestly, is just being able to engage in situations like this, figuring out what are the things you were really passionate about in undergrad, and what are experiences you've had since that time that you could bring back to the school. I think also for me, a lot of it was figuring out the different mentorship opportunities through it. And the different platforms available for us to really get to know those in undergrad. I know it's way better now, but when I was going through it, I really had no idea what consulting was or how to really prepare for an industry like that. And so I love the idea of being able to give back in areas that I felt like we were lacking a little bit, at least 10 years ago when I was there. And so since this time, for example, I'll do a plug, gotten to know Terry Connect, and we're really focused on getting more alumni on that platform with the goal of having an alumni base that's really just there to help react to your needs and provide some flash networking and mentoring. So highly recommend you connecting there. I think outside of that, it's really important to just stay engaged with the school. When I think about my own career development, a huge part of that has been staying engaged with those that I really expect through the Terry College of Business. It's amazing as you're 5 or then 10 years out, the diversity of experiences of your peers and staying connected with those. You can learn so much through them. And I probably goes without saying, but if you ever think about a career switch, so for example, when I was looking at Bain and Company, and I was really trying to understand what that career path would look like, being able to reach out to those who I knew through the Terry College of Business was really important for me personally. Not to mention, for anybody who loves travel, so I love backpacking. And so before and after business school, I actually traveled beforehand in Southeast Asia, but I actually called up people I knew through Terry in Vietnam and Thailand, and was able to really better get to know their cultures and things like that. So I would say there's so many benefits with staying engaged with Terry, both from an undergrad and a graduate perspective.
Thanks, Elisabeth. I want to pass this one over to Benjamin. I want to come back to your work with the marketing department, what we're starting here with the IB program about internships. Can you talk a little bit about the importance, one, of folks doing internships and doing them specifically with an international focus, and then also the value of bringing on interns into a company for a lot of these folks who will be joining the business force in a couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. So one of my proudest accomplishments for my company is that I have seeded an internship program with the Terry College of Business in the marketing department. And then, as was alluded to, we're trying to expand into the IB department this semester. So I'm really proud of that because it's my roots. It's where I went to school. When you looked back in the 10 years ago, we had Dog Connect, and you would apply for jobs, and You might find a few good marketing internships, but there wasn't really a lot. So I think I'm very proud to provide that. And I think the opportunity that I'm providing is, number one, for you to get class credit. You don't have to go to a class. You don't have to buy a book. You don't have to take a test. You're literally going to take that time that you would have spent doing that, working for a company within a UGA alumni that is a CEO of a social media marketing company that's going to give you a one-on-one kind of experience of meeting with me, working with team members, learning about real world clients and how the business world is in our industry. And I think that those things just cannot be taught in the classroom. Not that UGA is not doing a great job of teaching, but just there are certain things in business that you cannot learn in a classroom. And so I think that internship that I've seeded at UGA, if you talk to most of the people that have been through my internship experience, some of them have said they've even learned even more than they've learned in some of their classes. So I would just say that, number one, I'm offering class credit. Number two, I'm also giving you an opportunity in our internship program to actually get a paid part-time job. Funny enough, the first year I started the internship program, I would have all these students that would be on the fence about it. They were looking for part-time jobs. And I started to realize that essentially the average student in Athens, Georgia won't make more than $15 an hour. So that's what I set our rate for our internship program is when you finish the internship program, you then get extended a $15 an hour contractor role with my company if you performed well as an intern. That is an amazing opportunity. As one of the other panelists, Nicholas, had already mentioned at Citibank, like to go from an internship is one thing and get that real world experience. But then if you can take that internship and actually turn it into a paid position, even better, because you've already got a head start in that company. You've already spent time developing relationships with people in that company. And if you did well, then people probably already like you going into that role that they're hiring you for. So I would look at that as not just for my internship, but for any internship that you do. Don't just always go in thinking with an internship that it's just to get experience. It might actually lead to a job. Even if it's not directly, it could be a referral, or they might know somebody, or they might leave you a great recommendation. So I think that's another benefit of our internship program is that I'm trying to hire people from an intern into a contractor to essentially make a better pay than they're going to make in any part-time job at UGA. But it's also kind of one of those things where I need you to prove yourself to me. Like, you can't come out of college thinking that you deserve this dream job when you have no real world experience.
Amen, dude. This is what we talked about with Elisabeth offline.
So what I would say is, like, for my internship, what I'm trying to teach you is that as a CEO of creating this internship program for you and allowing you to intern with my company, if you can go through a semester of learning and problem solving and having a good work ethic, you're going to learn the principles of what it takes to be successful in business with me. And then you can use that foundational principle and apply that to a job offer once you've done something with my company. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of Terry students, such as myself, had to learn, is that you can't just go in emailing or LinkedIn messaging a CEO or a hiring manager and expect that they even should owe you any of their time. And that's the reality. So prove yourself, give value. I always say in networking, good networking is about giving first and then asking for things after you've provided value. So those are some cool things that are going on with our internship. And I'm really proud. We've actually had over 30 interns go through our program in just a little over 2 years. So I'm super proud to say that.
Awesome. Nicholas, I want to bring this one over to you as well. I know that you're working in a couple different ways to sort of lead and give back to Terry and the undergraduate population. One, you are a donor for one of the Passport Terry scholarships to help folks do study abroad. And you're also working with the mentor-mentee program for undergraduates. I want to ask you real quick, could you talk a little bit about the importance of giving back to the, a subsequent generation and, sharing success?
Yeah, so actually, so I've been involved with Terry unrelated to my dad having taught there, and I've been unrelated to my mother being a retired professor, or my wife being a Grady superstar grad and being a Grady ambassador. I have a three-pronged approach that I've tried to commit to for the last I guess 15 years I've been out of school is one. I went back almost every year to speak to undergrad classes at the invitation of Don Bennett Alexander, who was my favorite professor. And a couple of the folks on this call are from that class. They were neither of my mentee nor any sort of official connection other than they're actually living what I always preach to undergrads or really any student. It's what Benjamin says, like, humble yourself. Nobody owes you any time. I speak to undergrads, and then my father, 10 years ago in 2011, he was a tenured marketing professor. He passed away from pancreatic cancer. It's like a very rare cancer, but it's very deadly. And Natalie's on this phone probably still. For me, I didn't give $1 to my private school I graduated from and to Terry. I didn't do the brick. I didn't do the $5 or the 10. I did not one thing for years because I felt very passionate in focusing my energy on a cancer charity. That was my dad's wish. But then slowly I started getting pulled back into some of the alumni things because I started meeting great students at undergrads classes that I spoke to, like Miranda or Mary Margaret on this Zoom right now. And then I got an invitation to be a part of the Terry Mentor or the UGA Mentor Pilot Program. And I signed up for that. And my mentee is incredible. She's out of state, paying full tuition, got into PR and Grady and marketing and Terry. And she's just a rock star. And I'm answering your question, David, don't worry. My wife's an editor by education, and I'm like a business guy and marketing and international and all these things. So we kind of tag team mentor her, and she was applying for a travel abroad scholarship because the $3,000 cost through Grady to travel abroad was like, might as well have been $10 million. She either could go with a scholarship or could not consider. And she gave me the idea unintentionally and indirectly that study abroad is my biggest regret not doing. It's my wife's biggest regret not having done it. She couldn't afford it, and I didn't think it was a huge deal because I grew up traveling abroad, being very fortunate with my parents being from Latin America. I had a Coca-Cola internship in South America and all these things that checked the box. I was ignorant. I just, for some reason, thought it was the responsible thing to work summer at a job that doesn't matter instead of studying abroad and going to Spain or France or whatnot. So to answer your question, David, the undergrads being like sponges and absorbing non-academic information from speakers like myself, or I actually brought some of my bosses from Citi to speak to really expand their horizons. And that kind of turned me on to I can volunteer and make a difference, or I can give some of my time, which I consider to be quite valuable objectively, but also because like now I have a child and a mortgage, and being a UGA mentor is like a third side gig, right? And so I've had great mentees and I've fired one mentee because I don't have time for someone who doesn't have time to prioritize me, right? And so then that begat the scholarship and I reached out to Natalie, who I'd been talking to for years in development without really doing anything. And I kind of went all in. The only funny or anecdote or awkward part of this is I went all in February of 2020, 1 month before COVID. So the all in for international travel kind of hit a wall for a year, but it's allowed me to be more strategic on how to raise money and make an impact and stay in touch with people, like folks on this call. And my whole shtick professionally, but also personally is, there's Natalie, is I have a guy for that. Like I know a guy who knows a guy. That sounds funny, but professionally, I manage clients and I'm a generalist, but I always have some sort of a specialist. And the same is true in my personal life. And so I'm always trying to connect people or connect the dots. And now I'm trying to do that with my time and money for student programs, or in this case, international business. And it was also a sticking point for my father, who taught international business and ran international business programs for 12 years at Terry. He couldn't conceive of a kid from Georgia graduating with an international business degree, and either they didn't have a passport, couldn't afford travel. So this is just about kind of like making his vision come through. I know that was wordy, but hopefully the spirit of it makes sense. That it was like a chain of events where I was narrowly focused on one thing. Then I said, I'm very proud of my Terry education, and I always lead with it. And, working in New York City in banking, people, they have preconceived notions about the South. So I've used that to my advantage and, surprise them and be successful despite what they think happens south of, New Jersey. So.
Thanks, guys. Well, we're at the quarter till mark, so I want to go ahead and open this up to general chat. So I'm going to pass this back to Sarah and Reuben if you guys would like to manage the Q&A section.
Thank you guys, all three of you, for sharing. That was some great advice. So anyone with questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or, take yourself on mute. Anyone's welcome to ask any questions, but I'll actually kick off. I do have a question myself. For any of you guys right now in the virtual world, a lot of us are going through the onboarding process, either for an internship or a full-time job virtually, and then working with a team that we've never actually in person. How would you recommend, or do you have any advice on how someone could stand out in a virtual world, because you're not having those in-person, 5-minute conversations in the morning and things like that to really make personal connections? So do any of you have any advice for that situation?
I would say one of the great things about being an intern is that they will hopefully give you a lot of networking experience, which is less to me about the actual Zoom invite or whatever they send, but the ability for you to start to get a sense for who could potentially be a mentor or a couple of different mentors for you during that summer. And so one thing I would say is, in general, people are always looking to kind of give back and mentor you. So be on the lookout for those people who you think you could really learn from. And that doesn't just necessarily have to be the manager that's formally been put over you. Don't be shy about reaching out to someone that you may have seen at a networking event on Zoom or whatever else, and just ask for an extra 15 minutes of their time, 30 minutes of their time to really get to know their story. I think finding those informal mentorships during your summer can be really invaluable, both in terms of getting that full-time offer and to start making valuable connections once you come back.
Yeah, and internships are important for, I think, 3 things: to confirm a job or a field you like, to confirm you don't like it, which is perfectly fine, and to make for real connections. I always talk about organic connections, like making connections with faculty, students, and doing things like this while you're at Georgia. I missed out on that because I didn't do study abroad. I wasn't in a fraternity, and I thought I was being responsible by having BS jobs and helping my parents, who, knock on wood, did not need my financial help. And I look back and I'm like, damn it, I should have done those other things. And so to answer your question, a good way to stick out, I got to tell you, the bar is very low. Gen Z has set the bar quite low for you. So if you show up for a Zoom internship or an interview and you're merely on time and you've done any research on whom you're speaking with, you will be better than 50% of the rest of the cohort that is interviewing. And I am 100% convinced I have this job 15 years into my career because I read the hiring manager's bio and I made fun of Rutgers football. I'm positive that's why he hired me, because I spoke to him like a real person, not some deity. He's just a guy. I mean, he happens to be a fancy guy, but he's just a guy, So, Benjamin, sorry I was wordy.
Yeah, no worries. I would just say to kind of harp on that, consistency for me is key. So if you consistently get up and make the meeting on time, if you consistently have your Zoom camera on so I can connect with you on a personal level. I understand some people don't want to have their Zoom camera on, but if I don't know what you look like, I don't know what you're really doing in your background. The other thing I would say is follow up. A lot of people leave a meeting, leave an opportunity, and they don't follow up on it. Like, I don't know, for whatever reason, why a lot of people don't follow up after they meet somebody or they talk to somebody, but follow up is so important. And then I would also say just being a learner, to some of the things that have been said, an internship is a great place for you to learn, but you should not go into an internship or any new job onboarding process thinking that they're going to teach you everything. the best people that I've worked with are people that take what I say and they go above and beyond, and they go, 100 miles an hour to learn or problem solve or get better, right? And you would look at that in any industry, especially sports, right? Like nobody told LeBron James to become the king of the NBA. He just did it. So that would be my encouragement to standing out in your jobs, your internships, is go above and do research that is not being expected of you because you want to do a good job and you want to get better. And your manager or your supervisor will look back on that and be like, wow, I wasn't even expecting that. They've really kind of like delighted me with going above and beyond.
Yeah, I would put a huge emphasis on what Benjamin said about follow-up. It doesn't matter if we had a phone call and you thought everything I said was not what you wanted, or you have to send the follow-up, the cursory 2 or 3 sentence thank you. I just had this conversation last week with Elisabeth. I swear to you right now in real life, 3 weeks ago, my wife's company did not hire an HR director. I'm talking like $250,000 job because she didn't send thank you notes to the interview panel. And they were like, if she can't even say thank you, what else is wrong with her? And boom, she was out. So talk about first impressions really mattering in a Zoom life. Natalie asked a question about clients transitioning to Zoom and limited travel. So I don't know if I'm stealing your thunder, David, but I would say everything I said about Citi applies to the clients as well, that it's really everything's going to be hybrid going forward, and they'll spend money on travel if there's an ROI, return on investment, or some sort of a need.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for sharing. I think, Nathan, you've raised your hand. Do you have a question? And if not, Will, you all hand raised. Feel free to come off mute.
Yeah, this is for this is for everyone. My question is, how do you guys go about overcoming those cultural barriers in this new online environment?
Yeah, that's a really good one. I learned a lot. I had to do some Googling and reach out to some of my colleagues. When I had a Zoom with the Middle Eastern culture is very different. I'm no expert in it. And so I let my overseas colleague take the lead, and it was very interesting. And that culture for, I think Oman was the client. The first 10 minutes of a 30-minute call were personal. They recognize something about a holiday. They recognize something about one of the political leaders. They spoke about family, and very intentionally, after all the personal thing happened, it segued into business. And so to answer your question, I still remember Hopkins, who I think is still there. He was my international management lecturer, professor, or whatnot, talking about gift giving in Asia and how certain things are great and certain things are bad luck. So to answer your question simplistically, Will, ask. Please, for God's sake, do not assume, and do a bit of research and talk to somebody that's done business in whatever country you're looking at, or even Wikipedia is quite helpful. You don't want to make a massive faux pas and kill some sort of an opportunity before it ever started.
Yeah, I would say generally if you're flying to a client, you have plenty of time to look into cultural faux pas. It's a little harder when you're jumping between countries on Zoom calls during the day. So I think being really intentional in looking those things up. So for example, I work with a lot of Japanese colleagues, and just the formality and other things that come with those interactions versus what you might see in the States, and how important hierarchy and different things are. And knowing when you can push back and when you can't, how essentially shaming in the open is something where, constructive feedback is welcome in the United States, but there's a very specific way you need to be doing it within those countries. So really understanding the type of people you're going to be working with and understanding what that might look like and how to nuance your communication is important up front, as opposed to suddenly being in a Zoom call trying to figure that out in the moment.
Yeah, and I would just kind of close with, I think, doing your research again. Like if I haven't said research enough, And then I think Nicholas mentioned, like, if you have a colleague, if you know somebody at UGA that comes from a specific country or a certain background, then reach out to them. Like, create connections with people. I think, if anything, last year has taught us diversity is super important. And you don't have to go in thinking to do international business abroad that you have to be talking to people internationally. There's plenty of international people at the University of Georgia that you can connect with and learn more about their cultures and apply that to obviously doing business eventually internationally.
All right, Nathan, do you want to try see if you can come off mute and ask your question?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Sorry. I'm driving, I'm in the car, but ask Benjamin, you mentioned that giving is also a big part of, I'd love to as a third year Terry student, with not much work experience and limited number of connections. I mean, what can I offer, you think, and what are some ways that we can give back?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I hope that you take that with what I said, to say that you can give something, whether it's your time, whether it's donation, whether it's doing a project, or it's getting involved in your community. Like, every person is a human being. I'm not saying that I'm better than anyone else on this call. That's my perspective in business, is that we're all equal human beings. But in order to build stronger connections with business leaders or jobs that you want to get, you're going to need to give them value. So things like that could be like a research project, or taking an internship, or asking if they would be open to a cup of coffee if they're open to that, or recommending that you did a market research project. If you're in a third year class, you're a marketing major, why don't you do your class marketing project on that company for free and send them that marketing project and say, hey, I wanted to share this project I did for you. Let me know if it helps, right? I mean, just coming from a place of helping somebody is always going to come across in business as like a good person from my perspective.
That's great. Thank you.
Hey, Miranda, did you have your hands raised for a question as well? If you did, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, yeah, I did. But if we're running out of time, I don't need to either. But I just wanted to thank the panelists for speaking to us today. But my question was predominantly, since most of these Zoom meetings and just interactions with clients are now online, or even with teams, how do you guys tackle any issues or problems that may arise with like coworkers or managers? Because I feel like if we were in person, you could just kind of like pull them to the side and be like, hey, can I speak over a little bit more in this presentation? But now it's kind of on Zoom. Are you supposed to text them? Like, just how do you problem solve and tackle in a virtual world?
Oh, that's such a good one. I'll go first because it happens to us all the time. I would say pre-meet, if it's something client facing or anything of consequence that's not just internal, you can't give your coworker that look or kick them under the table because you're on Zoom. So we typically will pre-plan a meeting, very detailed, like very nuanced. We have 17 minutes and it needs to be in that time, or this guy is a talker. And so it's just about strategizing. But then the real-time text message during a Zoom to your coworkers is a thing. We're embracing it a lot, whether it's prompting to ask a question or to follow up on something or to wrap it up. Stop selling, or we're running out of time, etc. And so, yeah, it's just either a live text message or pre-planning some sort of an interaction. But that's a great question. And for leadership or managing, calendarization of check-ins. My junior staff have a weekly check-in with my office's boss, who's my partner, the managing director of the Mid-Atlantic. And that's where you air your grievances unless it's on fire in real time.
Yeah, I'll just step in and say, for me, a lot of people are chatting me now. I feel like I'm back in the 90s with like instant messenger and everyone's like slacking me and Google meeting me. And for me as a CEO, I need to be focused. So I don't prefer for somebody to be chatting me because I'm in meetings and then that's going on during the meeting. So for me, a simple email, hey, Benjamin, if you don't mind, can I find 15 to 30 minutes? Can we schedule a time to talk one-on-one? I wanted to talk to you more about the project that I just presented, or I didn't get to ask the questions that I needed to ask you on one-to-one because we were in a team environment. Do you mind if we just chat real quickly? Like, if you say something around like 15 to 30 minutes and you give a purpose as to why the meeting and why you need to have that meeting one-on-one, most leaders, if they're good leaders, should take that meeting with you. If you just say it very simply in that way, and then that one-on-one is really important. So another thing that we really didn't talk about, we mentioned very briefly, is like phone calls. Like I would say most people that are CEOs or supervisor people, like they do have cell phones. Maybe they're not taking a lot of calls, but what if you're the one intern or one employee that does get that person's number and calls them on the phone? That might be their only phone call all day because they're on Zoom calls all day. So think about that too. Not everything has to be Zoom. We all sleep with our cell phone next to our bed. I mean, let's be honest. So like call them now and again if they're open to that. Just ask them, what is your communication preference? And can I find some brief time to discuss some things with you one-on-one that I would just like to communicate with you that I can in a team environment?
And then just to piggyback on what Nick was saying about calendaring. So one thing that we do is set up PD chats every 2 weeks. So professional development chats, just 30 minutes between you and your manager. Now, this is assuming the conflict would be between you and that person. But it kind of takes that pressure off of feeling you need to proactively reach out to them to set up a more personal time to talk. And the design of those meetings is to talk nothing about what you're currently doing in terms of your work. It's simply to talk about upward and downward feedback. How are you feeling? Maybe there was some ad hoc feedback given that was a little bit harsh and you want to better understand it or kind of express how you're feeling in the workplace. And just having that on the calendar and that open dialogue we found is really helpful as well.
Thanks, Nick, Benjamin, and Elisabeth. I think we're a few minutes over time. Thank you guys for giving your time and all the good advice and good answers to our students. I am sure, I don't want to speak too proactively for you guys, but I'm sure that if anybody here wants to reach out through like LinkedIn or something, that you guys would be available.
For sure.
Absolutely. Hit me up on Terry Connect.
Yeah.
Terry Connect too. Awesome. Thank you guys. Everybody who's on the call, if you would like to attend any more of the International Business Week events, please visit the website, intlbusiness.com. UGAintlbusiness.com. Also, if you're one of our undergrads in IB programs, you probably have gotten 1,000 emails. So please check that for the scheduled events and registering. Thank you guys again for attending. Any final questions or any final plugs or anything before we sign off?
There's only a handful of you on this call. So for real, what David said, who's incognito as Joshua on Zoom, that's David, right? So LinkedIn us, stay in touch, and you can be like Miranda or Mary Margaret. I spoke to their class over a year ago, pre-COVID. I'm in touch with them. Anytime they need any reference they need, I know them to be their transcript is the transcript and their soft skills are what they are, but I'm happy to always be a reference or provide any help. And so that this is the living proof of kind of what all three of us panelists were talking about is be intentional, be thoughtful, and, reach out. You don't get anything you don't ask for.
Yeah, I'll just kind of end with, if you're on this call, hats off to you. I'm sure this was emailed to everybody in the IB program, so that says something about you that you're here. So keep doing that. Keep going to these events. Keep looking for networking things. Keep leveraging Terry. Arguably, it's one of the best connections I have in my life. So value that and use it to its full extent. And then also I talked about my internship program. So if anyone's looking for the summer intern, reach out to me, email me. Here's another thoughtful thing. Why don't you, if you reach out to me, mention something that was said or I said. And people like to be thanked for being being at a speaking gig too, right? So if somebody comes to me and says, Benjamin, I really enjoyed hearing you speak, or something like that, that goes a long way.
Yeah, and completely agree with both of them were saying. I mean, clearly we're here because we like giving back to Terry. So if there's anything that I can be helping with as well from a consulting perspective, or if you're considering an MBA or anything else, please let me know if I can help.
Awesome. Well, all right, guys, on that note, I think we will close it down. Thank everybody for coming and have a good evening.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Sounds good.
Thank you all.
Bye, guys.